Now, one of the topics that will likely be discussed is the ongoing trade tensions between the United States and, of course, several other countries. Earlier, CGTN's Ramah Nyang sat down with Aly-Khan Satchu to discuss the significance of the BRICS Summit when it comes to that specific issue. Now, Satchu is the CEO and founder of investment advisory firm Rich Management here in Kenya.
So one of the main arguments that has often been advanced about this whole BRICS idea is that South Africa, by virtue of its membership, can act as a sort of anchor, a representative, if you will, of the rest of the African economies and the African needs and aspirations. Is that an argument you agree with?
No, it doesn't. I think increasingly what we've seen is that South Africa was once the gateway to sub-Saharan Africa. But increasingly we're seeing Africa have, new poles. East is Nairobi, west is Lagos, north we're seeing Cairo, for example. So I think, the importance of South Africa in the context of being a spokesperson and being an advocate for the rest of Africa is not proven by any stretch of the imagination. I think, they have very much not a make America great again, but make South Africa great again mission. And I think you can see that in Ramaphosa's recent successes and clocking $30 billion of investments, I think was the last count. But I don't think that Africa considers Ramaphosa its spokesman. He's a tremendous politician, but I think the continent has equally sharp voices who are more invested in defending the rest of the continent's national interests.
To extend that to its logical conclusion, then, is it perhaps time to expand the membership of the BRICS groups to include other countries other than the five?
I think whether you expand it beyond the five, or you create a sort of secondary expansion where people might not rank at that level of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, but you have to make it more inclusive. And I think the initial invitation to South Africa was not justified on the economics, because South Africa is so much smaller than the other four. But it was more a mission of inclusion, and I think here you've got to expand that mission a little bit more.
With respect to this specific summit, given the amount of debt that we've seen flooding the African continent, and a big chunk of that obviously coming from China, should we expect to hear talks about restructuring some of that debt at this point in time?
The restructuring of debt, look, what we know now, and with the many examples, is from whether you look at Sri Lanka at the port there, whether you look at Zambia, whether you look at other African countries, this is a time bomb that's going to blow off. The question is it diffused ahead of time, or do we have to have a couple of blow-ups before policymakers become seized of the problem? And that is going to be something we've all got to watch out for. And at the moment, in the firing line of that question, debt restructuring is Zambia, but then there are plenty of other ones, Djibouti. I mean, all these debt to GDP ratios above 60, 65, 70% are countries which are at risk. A 10% move in the currency takes them right off the charts. And I think, balance sheets are maxed out. The returns that they're achieving on maxing out the balance sheets are not sufficient. Therefore, we know this is coming at us. The question is, who's going to be ahead of the curve? Who's going to be talking to their lenders ahead of time and not reacting when it hits the fan?
So, finally, from your perspective, what would make this summit, 10th BRICS Summit, being held in Africa, what would make this a success?
I would like to see a commitment to the rest of Africa from the BRICS nations. I would like to see them turn their gaze from Johannesburg and look across the rest of sub-Saharan Africa. I think, BRICS is an important component of the African equation today, and I would like to see more effort coming in from those countries to do more trade with the continent, in particular China, India, which is still lagging China in a big way but has other advantages, see them stepping up much more aggressively. And just generally looking at the whole South-South component and thinking to ourselves, how do we stimulate ourselves even more in order to offset the weakness that is coming out of the Trumpian world.